Welcome to Reflections on Identity, a podcast series exploring educators' narratives on their professional identity. Today, we are talking to John Mackay, who is a teacher in the charity and community education sector. John, thank you for coming on to the podcast. Can you just say a little bit about your role to start the episode, please?
Yeah, so essentially, I'm a freelance teacher, and I would say there are three strands to my work currently. I work for an organization called ECAS, which is a charity for physically disabled people in Edinburgh. And they have a centre in Edinburgh which allows people to go along and engage in a number of different activities, such as craft, art, music, yoga, Tai Chi, and the group that I'm the leader of is called Reading and Creative Writing. So we do literature. We look at all sorts of texts, poetry, drama, nonfiction, fiction, and we also do creative writing as well, often based on the texts that they've looked at in the first half of the session. My other work is with another disabled organisation called Glasgow Disability Alliance, which is where I live. And they do a number of different activities as well. And I have done and am doing with them a literature group called Book Talk. We've done philosophy sessions, everyday philosophy, and we also do a sort of general conversation group called Tea and Chat. It's all based online, whereas the ECAS work is in person, where I go to Edinburgh. The Glasgow Disability Alliance is all online via Zoom, and it's a great chance for people to come along and people who are often isolated in their homes for obvious reasons, and the online teaching allows them both to learn something new and to connect with other disabled people who they wouldn't normally see in the course of everyday life. I suppose my third strand is that I teach out in the community. So currently, the latest course that's coming up is at a local community centre in Glasgow called Finn's Place, which runs an awful lot of different activities. And I'm going to be running a course which is based on my PhD, which is on elegy, which is obviously poetry of death and mourning. Um, so part of my everyday activities, I suppose you could say, is monitoring which sort of community centres might be looking for courses to be set up, making contact with them, and then hopefully setting up, say, 6-week courses, 10-week courses, recruiting people, doing those courses, and then um, hopefully repeating those courses at the same centres. And I think that just about the size of it at the moment. Yeah.
So it's very varied. I mean, there's a real range of things you're doing there, both in terms of the content, the schedule, and the fact that some of it's sort of physical, face to face, and some of it's online.
Yeah.
Do you feel you have a coherent identity as a professional because of that, John, or do you think that your identity shifts depending on who you're working with and where you're working?
Um, I mean, I think what I would say is that I feel that my identity, there's very little difference in my identity between my professional life and my personal life, I suppose. I suppose my values in both my professional life and my personal life are very, very closely aligned. I think what's at the heart of it is that it's rooted in making literature and creative writing accessible to many different people, I think. People on the fringes of society, trying to make a difference to people who are often forgotten about or basically don't have the means or the resources to do courses in creative writing and study literature. And this goes back for me, I feel like my identity is rooted right back to just after I left university, because my first voluntary work and my first job was with a charity called the British Trust for Conservation Volunteers. And I did something quite different then, where I taught practical skills to long-term unemployed people. So, for instance, hedge laying, dry stone walling, tree planting, that sort of thing. Um, with the intention that those unemployed people would then acquire skills because they could then go out and more easily seek jobs. And I think more recently, I volunteered for about 5 years at a food bank in Glasgow, in central Glasgow, and eventually set up a writing group, a language and writing group for the refugees. It was a food bank specifically for refugees. It is a food bank specifically for refugees. And I set up a writing group for them, which then became a paid activity rather than, moving. I volunteered in the food bank, but then that became a paid activity as well. Um, so I suppose that's a way of saying where my identity is rooted and how I feel that in terms of my professional and personal life, they're closely aligned, I think.
I mean, is it something you're kind of conscious of, John? I mean, some people who have been on the series have said that it is something that's kind of on the radar fairly,
Mm.
typically all the time or most of the time. And some people have said very much it's kind of under the surface. I mean,
Right.
what's your kind of thoughts in terms of how you view identity for yourself in that regard?
I think I'm very conscious of it, really. I think, because if I look back again, I did I did my undergraduate degree, then I did a master's in poetry, and then I did my PhD in contemporary poetry. And of course, especially after doing the PhD, as your thoughts turn to, well, what am I going to do next? Will I go the traditional academic route and work in academia? I think that's when I became conscious of my identity and exactly what I wanted to do um, with my knowledge and experience is to take that into spaces where people might not normally have the chance or feel that they have the ability to get involved. I think there is a very strong feeling amongst a lot of people, especially on the fringes of society, who think that, well, let me give you an example. There was one of the ECAS members from the Edinburgh group said, I always thought literary people were above me until I joined this reading and creative writing group. And that one of the reasons for that was that we have author visits. So through funding from the Scottish Book Trust, I invite published authors to come along and speak to the group. And it's always been an entirely positive and successful experience. That ECAS member then said, well, I realized then that, this space can also be for me. It's not just for people who are perceived as being in very highfalutin literary circles, I suppose. So I suppose I could say then I'm conscious of my identity, and essentially what I want to do with that is to make my subject area accessible and to say to people, you have every right to be involved, and this is a space for you as well. Um,
It sounds you've got quite a political, philosophical, ethical view on this.
yes.
With when you're engaging with other practitioners, facilitators, and colleagues, John, because it's such a sort of a diverse and diffuse area,
Mm,
really,
mm.
is there a sense of what we might call of a sort of a community or a community of practice and in that, or are you sort of operating as lone wolves?
I suppose one answer to that is because at least half of my work is teaching online. Um, and that means it's much more of a sort of a solitary individual pursuit. When you're talking about, for instance, when you're talking about other practitioners, even if you are notionally part of an organization, which I am with ECAS and with the Glasgow Disability Alliance. So often the nature of my job means that I sort of uh, arrive in the classroom and then leave the classroom, often without seeing any other practitioners involved. Uh, I have no office. Often I sort of come and go in the night, um, sort of shadowy figure, and many other so-called 0 hours workers do exactly the same. So I do lack a sense of collective identity. I lack a sense of community, although we do occasionally have line meetings, we have sort of get-togethers as well. Um, I suppose ironically, if I think about it, in the past when I've worked for FE colleges and I've worked for universities as well, it was sort of the same thing there when I was sort of regarded as casual worker, came in, did my session, and then left. So one of the few times I felt a sense of community and meeting staff from other departments was during industrial action, actually.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
uh, interestingly, UQ provided that sort of community feeling, and you felt you had a common cause at the precise time when the management were trying to um, effectively take away your job was the one time you felt a sort of sense of community involvement.
Do you feel that that's, in a sense, a loss, John? I mean, or is it something that you're mindful of, this sort of lack of community, if you like, or lack of a community of practice? Or is it something you just see as inevitable and you just get on with it? I mean, is it a problem that there isn't that community or not for you?
I think it's yeah, it is part of a problem. I mean, in the past I've worked when I was in London for about 30 years before I came here. I worked as a journalist for quite a long time in very busy offices, and there was a strong sense of collective work there, working to deadlines, depending on other people, feeling like your colleagues were there supporting you. I do miss that in a sense, although in a way it's the way the world has moved, and so many more of us now are online and doing teaching online. And actually, that online teaching has a lot of advantages as well because, I don't have to travel to a workplace. I don't have to pay the money for that. I actually walk into my spare room in my flat, which is my office. I turn on my computer and we go. But in terms of the actual teaching sessions as well, there's a certain intimacy in amongst the class, but um, there's also a sense of intimacy lost as well. Not just with the people who are students, but also with your fellow staff as well. You sort of hear about them from a distance in emails and in online meetings, sort of thing. So yes, I do miss that sense of collectivity. Yeah.
Last question I was going to ask you was whether you encounter any challenges around your sort of personal identity, either internally, in yourself or in terms of organizations. I mean, you don't have to divulge if you don't want to, but are there any times where those sort of challenges occur where you feel your values are possibly in resistance to the values of others or organization or otherwise?
I think, yeah, probably I felt like my values were much more in conflict with other people and other sets of people when I worked in more mainstream organizations, when I worked in FE colleges, and when I worked in universities, because I feel that in those mainstream organizations, you are regarded much more as a sort of tool for recruiting students and making money for the university,
Mhm.
um, rather than an individual person who's doing, really beneficial, good work. So I feel now when I work for charities, I can much more carve out my own identity. I have much more of a sense of freedom, where also in FE colleges and universities, you're working to very much stricter guidelines in terms of syllabus, etc. I create all the all the all the work that we do in those groups. So, I have control over that. Um, but also, when the sessions commence, from that starting point of the text that I've chosen, then those conversations can go off in many different directions. Then the students feel that they have a sense of control over that then. So I feel like all round, I feel much more at liberty and much more relaxed in the sector I work in now than previously.
So, I mean, it sounds to sort of wrap up as though you've got this sort of dual-edged kind of context in a way, John, where on the one hand, you are sort of quite isolated, I suppose, if we're talking of other communities, other sort of professional groups, but you've also got the license and the liberality that goes with that, haven't you? Where you can literally, create what you want to do in alliance with the students, the delegates, whatever. And
Absolutely, and there's nobody looking over my shoulder and saying, "Should you really be doing this?" I remember there's a classic moment when I worked in an FE college about many years ago, and as you do in literature, you use texts that aren't necessarily on the syllabus or will be appearing on the exam to illustrate the texts that are actually appearing on the exam. Literature is all about that. But the moment I tried to divert into other texts, I would get the question quite sharply from the students, "Do we need this for the exam?" And I said, "Well, strictly no, but this is providing you with extra knowledge and providing echoes of the
yeah,
of the
yeah.
text." But they almost refused to do it. It was a very sort of mechanical approach that I faced. And when you're teaching literature, that is very stifling indeed. So I'm glad I'm not in that sector anymore.
Thanks so much, John. You have been listening to Reflections on Identity. We hope you can join us for the next episode in our series. Click on the bell icon or follow for notifications. We'd also love to hear from you, so please put your thoughts in the comments. Bye for now.